First ever Eyewitness News Central Valley PolitiCast here with Brittany Martinez and Matt Klink. Well, I had planned to start this, a little bit differently. And then there was a press conference yesterday, a couple press conferences where we had President of the United States called the President of Ukraine, the President of Russia, lots of presidential talk there. And then on top of that, called his Vice President, someone in the Trump family. It may not have been, Donald Trump, could have been somebody else. Uh, is this a concerning sign again, and just kind of gets throwing flames on the fire of a potential replacement? What did that press conference, if anything, mean for the president going forward?
Well, look, that Joe Biden is he's between a rock and a hard place. He's clearly not going to back down, and he was largely a competent speaker for the press conference when he talked about foreign affairs. He did make some massive blunders, and this is where the dilemma comes in. Every word, every movement that Joe Biden makes between now and either dropping out or November 5th will be under immense scrutiny. And the Democrats are between a rock and a hard place now because they have no choice. They're stuck with him. They handed him the nomination because they wouldn't let anybody really compete against him. And now they're not happy with their pick. So, I mean, I think he's in the race for good. I don't think he's dropping out. And I don't think anybody's happy about it.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think that the press conferences yesterday did nothing to build confidence about how much he is there still, about his mental acumen and his capability of still holding the office of the president. And, if I'm putting my tinfoil hat on here, when he referred to, what did Trump, was he referring to Trump, or was he referring to the current vice president? And he was referring to she, but then was saying that she was not qualified for the role. So if I'm being conspiratorial a little bit, it makes me wonder. I wonder if those are some of his internal thoughts also coming to the forefront a little bit, just because he was sort of combining both the vice president and the former president, sort of meshed into one. And as far as whether he'll stay in this race or not, I keep changing my mind on this every few hours, honestly. I think that at this rate, if there is someone to switch into that role, it'd have to be the vice president, from my understanding. In order to be able to keep those campaign funds, it would have to be someone who's already on the ticket. And if you're supposed to go elsewhere and broaden your horizons, I mean, presidential campaigns, I know we talked about this last time, but by the time that someone gets to November of a presidential year, their campaign has been stood up for about 2 years. It's a monumental undertaking. And I think that if it is anyone but the current vice president, that all but guarantees a Trump victory. And even if it is the current vice president, I don't know if she's going to be able to pull it through. It's already a tight race between Biden and Trump themselves. I don't know if switching to her really makes a difference.
I think there was an interesting stat that was taken away from the poll, and maybe this relates back to, or from stat that was taken away, I should say, from the debate, which was that you saw a number of debate polls where if you just compare the two candidates, a lot of times it was an overwhelming victory for Trump. But if you threw in a third choice of nobody won or unknown, it wasn't as overwhelming a victory for Trump. Some polls showing him under 50%, Biden in some of those same polls under 10%, for what that's worth. But does that give, I guess, credence to the fact that, this is still July and we have a number of months left in this race?
Well, don't forget, Will, it's highly unusual for two presidential candidates who aren't even, by the way, the official nominees of their party yet, to debate in June. Yet that's exactly what Joe Biden wanted, because he knew that his campaign was lagging and he needed a boost from that debate. Well, that didn't happen. In fact, it will arguably go down in history as one of the worst presidential debate performances ever. Not in the 21st century, but ever. It was a disaster for him. And I think that Brittany and I could also agree, and I'm probably going to smile when I say this, Donald Trump was not, Abraham Lincoln in this Lincoln Douglas debate. He was, he spewed inaccuracies. He was, the only thing that Donald Trump did that he did really well is that he shut up and let Joe Biden hang himself. So, I mean, that last debate is not going to win any awards for rhetorical prowess. However, Look, I think when the history of this debate is written, it will be the debate that Joe Biden showed his age.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to picture a Trump 7 years ago, Gettysburg Address, seeing how that would go over. But you know,
In the tall hat. Yeah.
yeah, tall hat, the whole thing. Uh,
And you know what? I'll add that I think for someone like Trump, who's known to sort of say whatever he wants, whenever he wants, he's been very disciplined over the last 2 weeks or so, because he could, and I mean, he's still out campaigning, he's still saying things, but he's really just letting the Democrats partake in that infighting. And I always say this, that one thing that Democrats are way better at than Republicans is at infighting. And I don't know if that kind of comes to core values of just being able to express yourselves, the way sort of that party I think tends to do more. But the infighting is there, and if they want to pull this off, they're going to have to get together.
I know a few polls have shown Harris maybe right at that margin where Biden is either trailing or tied with Trump, or slightly better in some areas. What difference would switching a candidate make down ballot here in California, and of course, most importantly, here in the Central Valley, in the Salas and Valadeo race? Or does the longer Biden stays in, that's not necessarily a good thing for the Salas campaign?
So let's not forget, Kamala Harris is not a great campaigner herself. She won a grand total of 0 delegates when she ran for president against Joe Biden in 2020. So the fact that she is polling near him or better than him, again, that's all in theory. If she were to become the nominee, then it gets real, and then I think you would see some more accurate polling numbers. I think for a state like California, obviously, they would make great news out of the fact that a Californian is at the top of the ticket again. Interestingly enough, Kamala Harris is probably better known in California than she is in most of the rest of the United States, and it would certainly give a boost to some Democrat candidates. But I don't think the enthusiasm is going to change that much among Democrats. That's their biggest worry right now, is that the Democratic base voter, they're not really excited. There's not a competitive Senate race. Adam Schiff is going to roll over Steve Garvey. And there are not a lot of hot button issues on this ballot. So that's the bigger problem that all Democrats should be worried about right now.
And it's not like the vice president would be coming in here with a clean slate. She is part of the Biden administration. So essentially, you're just changing one person. I mean, you literally would be changing one person on the ticket for the other. But not only is she a bad campaigner, or perhaps not the bad campaigner, maybe this is a little bit of, inside Washington, D.C. bubble. But a lot of people have criticisms about her. In D.C. specifically, it is not a secret at all that she has been notorious for not taking the guidance of staff, kind of lashing out a little bit, or being frustrated with them, because she's not following their guidance, right? And so I think that we're in a pressure cooker right now, and sometimes when you're in that high intensity environment, you can either rise to the occasion or implode. And I don't know that she has the political chops to be able to rise to the occasion. That's my personal opinion.
And one last question on this topic before we switch over. I just want to wonder, like, I know next week is the RNC convention. How fast is the news cycle gonna switch? And maybe this conversation we're having right now could be in the past, because who knows what's going to happen? We're probably going to need a vice presidential pick on Monday. How much are we forecasting this right now, and how much is there the potential to go wrong or go right for the Trump campaign next week?
Well, the news is going to get worse for Democrats. The question that everybody should be asking is, how big is the bounce that the Republicans get coming out of their convention? And that all depends on how the convention goes. If Donald Trump gives a presidential type speech, I think that will certainly make those voters that are on the fence about him more comfortable. If his vice presidential pick is someone that expands the ticket's reach into parts of the country where the Trump campaign is not particularly strong, I think that's going to give him a big bounce. But if the convention goes poorly and the bounce is only a couple points, I think that then the pressure goes back onto the Democrats. I mean, think of this as a chess match or a tennis match where you're hitting the ball back and forth over the net. You know, right now the ball is just stuck on the Democrat side and they're swinging and missing with their racket. But Trump's going to hit another ball back over. The Democrats are going to have to do something at their convention because we know what the ticket will be. Right now it's Biden and Harris. What's the news? They have to make news. So something will happen because they're going to have to try to claw back that bounce and hopefully catch back up to Donald Trump.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brittany. Yep.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I was just, listening to some coverage pre convention, theorizing here, and folks were just sort of indicating that in 2016, a lot of folks, even early on, or right when we were at the point of a convention, they hadn't been built in the way to favor Trump. And then we had 2020, obviously, that was a pandemic, and so it was its own beast. But now that the folks who are here, the delegates, the influencers, the RNC is bringing influencers for the first time, which I feel like sounds very much like the Democrats here, political influencers. And it's all being built in support of him. The delegates, I'm sure that you've seen coverage of those Arizona delegates that got a stern talking to, and all of a sudden now they're like, oh no, there's no problem. We're happy to be here and to support. So I am interested to see. I know that Nikki Haley released her delegates this week. That doesn't mean that they won't still support her just because she's released them. I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think anything extremely consequential or monumental is going to happen to change anything, but it will be interesting to see what the reaction is post debate. Like you mentioned, Will, if he is able to deliver a speech that sounds presidential, which in my opinion, I don't think he's done too many of those personally that I've seen.
Yeah, but I will add though, I mean, the biggest news coming out of next week is who Trump's number 2 is. Mike Pence was selected for a reason in 2016, and he helped, assuage conservative Christians and middle of America that Donald Trump was a true conservative. I think that Trump is going to send a different message with this pick this time, and the person that he selects arguably becomes the immediate frontrunner for the 2028 presidential campaign. So that's going to be the news. I mean, I think that other than that, and Brittany, you're right. Donald Trump has not given a lot of presidential speeches, but Donald Trump has also not followed debate rules, and he followed the debate rules this last time, and it worked to his advantage. I think he's actually listening to his campaign consultants a little bit more this time.
Well, the race officially not done in July, but look at this segue. The race that is done in July is the Mike Boudreaux, Vince Fong race for California's 20th district. It was a 20 percentage point difference. I think depending actually how you look at it, a thumping, if you look at it that way, I think 40% though for Mike Boudreaux is very impressive for someone who had to come into Kern County and then put on a show as far as trying to win over voters that are, of course, deeply in the Kern County Republican Party's pocket for one of the most important seats of the state, the reddest seat of the state, Kevin McCarthy's former seat. What did you make of that news that he decided to go out and bow out and decide to say, you know what, I'm not going to run this into November. I'm not going to make this an uncivil race and go with a lot of back and forth, more attacks between myself and Mr. Fong, because there really hadn't been much as far as too many vicious barbs exchanged in this whole race. What do you guys make of the news?
Yeah, I mean, this race was over. The second that Vince won, or the Congressman Fong, excuse me, won the special election to replace Kevin McCarthy, the die was cast. And you had 2 Republicans squared off against each other. And I think that Sheriff Boudreaux, either someone talked to him or he read the political tea leaves and realized that if he had wanted to have any political future, that 1, he shouldn't rough up Congressman Fong, and 2, that he was going to lose, and why prolong the inevitable? So he did the responsible thing, and he backed out, which allows the congressman to deeply immerse himself in Washington, D.C., and build a stronger base in his new congressional district. It was the right thing to do.
Honestly, I feel kind of bad for him because I think that, there are so few Republicans in the House. Obviously, now Congressman Vince Vaughn, he would have the incumbency advantage. But Boudreaux, overall, he seems like a good guy, and he's very credible with his career and his history there. And but I understand he'd already been thinking about it earlier this year, whether he'd continue forward. So I understand, I empathize. And then I'll say, and I don't know if we'll get into this separately, the PAC that he's stood up, I think that it's telling that it's not anything that is sort of anti-Fong or anti-Fong adjacent. It's for folks who are committed to common sense policies and the rule of law. And I think that's right alongside conservative principles in general. So I think that I don't think this is the last that we've seen of him, and I'll be interested to see what his future holds, but it's not congressman of this district for now.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing is what he's doing going forward, in that he's not anti-Fong. You talked about how he endorsed Vince Fong, and the fact too that it's set up around this justice idea, to promote candidates that have some sort of a law enforcement background, and it seems really apt because he did better than I think expected, despite still a 20 percentage point loss. And at the same time, too, you have what may potentially be the biggest candidate in California going forward for governor, as a Republican, would be Chad Bianco, the sheriff there in Riverside County, who's already making his press tour. And then in Nevada next door, in more of I guess, a slight blue lean state, purple state there, you have a former sheriff who's governor of that state, former sheriff of Clark County. And now we also have this ballot measure that seems to, I know we had a ballot measure in 2020 that was trying to do similar things as far as up penalties, and kind of run on this law and order idea. There's several district attorneys and sheriffs that are backing what is now known as Prop 36. Is this kind of an interesting wave that he's taking advantage of, and also not running against, I guess, the Kevin McCarthy political machine, should we say?
Yeah, I mean, sheriffs have a great platform. The timing is certainly right for sheriffs because of the concerns, particularly in certain parts of California regarding law and order, and frankly, the lack thereof, and putting people who commit crimes in jail. So yeah, they do read the political. I mean, look, these men and women who are sheriffs are political animals. They're elected, countywide typically. They have large, constituencies, so they understand politics. And they have a great title from which to run on. So it's not a surprise. And look, I think that, once you hold these elected offices, I think that, it's not that far of a leap to look up to another higher office and say, gosh, I did this. I know I could do that too. So it's common sense. And I think that, and common sense and timing are two important factors here that play in the sheriff's favor.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, he talked about he's not looking at the assembly district, former assemblyman, now Congressman Vince Fong's assembly seat. He has his eyes, he says, on a state Senate seat. Obviously, the two in proximity here are kind of a bit of a toss-up, one where Democrat Melissa Hurtado occupies, and then the other one where Shannon Grove has been for some time now in the state Senate. Two interesting seats, and two that are in this area, and ones to keep in mind. Do you think he'd make a good candidate based on his impression that he's made here in Kern County, or do you think once again there will be a debate about whether or not that one of those two seats should have someone who's more in Bakersfield? This is way ahead of time, but we got 2 years before this even comes up. But he's already made his intentions pretty clear.
Yeah, no, I think that Bakersfield is very much. People from Bakersfield are very much proud to be from Bakersfield. And so I totally understand where folks would be coming from. I think that he'd still do a wonderful job representing them. And I think he'd definitely be an excellent contender for that seat. He ran for a higher office already, so he obviously has some political acumen when it comes to being able to run a campaign, even though, of course, he suspended his campaign for now. But I think he would be a very great candidate, very competitive, and offer, especially if it was for Hurtado seat, offer some common sense solutions. I mean, this is one of the reddest areas of California, and so I think folks are always sort of itching for that leadership, or someone who sort of just falls in line with those values.
Perfect. And on this last topic, just focusing on the future of Governor Newsom, I think just a very interesting week from his perspective of where he is addressing fire safety concerns. The weeks before, he's been out on the campaign trail. Earlier this week, too, I believe, out on the campaign trail. He's all over the place as far as where he's been. He has this Prop 36 initiative that he's been not wholeheartedly in support for, and now he's kind of finally spoken out against it now that his push for a ballot initiative did not go through, and it seems like a lot of those poison pills that were supposed to go into some state legislative work is also all gone. What do you make of his future first, and then we can jump into any other Democrat potential presidential candidate as well?
Gavin Newsom's immediate near-term political future, that window is closing rapidly. His best hope at this point is that Joe Biden gets reelected and possibly gives him something in the cabinet. But the Senate's not going to open up because Alex Padilla and Adam Schiff are going to hold those seats until they decide they don't want to hold them anymore. And obviously he can't run for governor again. So the current governor Newsom is between a rock and a hard place. And I think that he's struggling with that. He's demonstrated loyalty to Biden. And you know that he fancies himself on the national stage, but that's not going to it's certainly not going to happen at least until 2028.
Yeah, obviously Newsom has presidential aspirations. He started his red state campaign where he was putting billboards all over the country. I think it speaks volumes that the Biden campaign has leaned on him during this time to be one of their strongest surrogates, and to come out and say that Biden is fine. Like, I'm not running for president. I support Biden. We should all support Biden. I think that says a lot. And I think that says that they are going to be angling to put him into a cabinet seat should the Biden administration win again. I don't think Newsom will ever be president. I know that he wants it real bad, but I just don't see that in his future, especially when, say, Trump does win and Newsom terms out. By the time it was 2028, he'll have been out of office for a while, and people tend to forget folks and just remember what's exactly in front of them at the time. So I don't think that is to his, obviously I don't think Trump winning is to his benefit anyway, but especially if he's thinking about his political future and what that looks like in the next few years.
And then just finally on this, I know his approval rating in California is not particularly great. It's one of the lowest among governors across the country. But given how blue California is, it kind of goes over, I think, a lot of people's heads, especially that are watching this from neighboring states or from states across the country, when they see him go in and talk and they think of, okay, this is the answer to DeSantis or Abbott in some of those large red states, the other biggest states across the country. Last question on this. How important is it for the Biden campaign to have, even if they're not going to jump in and become the next candidate, to have someone like Newsom, someone like Gretchen Whitmer, and imagine a number of the younger, more youthful senators as well to jump in there and kind of illustrate the points that he's unable to, or seemingly unable to, I should say?
The Joe Biden campaign will almost certainly use surrogates more. And Gavin Newsom, while he is unpopular in California, and I think part of the reason he's unpopular is because homelessness and crime are still problems that he's proven he can't solve. So you do when presidents are in trouble, they travel overseas. When governors are in trouble, they travel in the United States. Gavin Newsom is still eloquent. He will play well in certain cities. I wouldn't send him to some locations. But if you're sending him into places to rally the troops, Gavin Newsom is eloquent. He's young. He looks like a vibrant man out there campaigning. Basically everything that Joe is not. So he's going to continue to do more of it, and his approval ratings are probably stuck where they are through the duration of his term.
I think the biggest advantage that Newsom has here is that he's a great orator and he looks the part. I think the thing that is his biggest disadvantage is basically everything else. The California exodus, 200,000 Californians have moved from the state. The stuff about the gas stoves, it's the electric vehicles, it's the water shortages, or excuse me, I guess the putting caps on water and like what if you can water your lawn, if you can, when you're allowed to use your own resources that you're paying for. And though I think that people know Newsom to be sort of like this young, maybe Kennedy-esque person, I know that at least Republicans, we know what the true narrative is. And so whenever we get the opportunity, we just hammer home, especially even if it's nationwide. It doesn't just have to be California. But we'll see what happens with him. I think that he is a strong contender on paper, but in reality, I think that he's done a lot to sink the greatest state in the country down.
I don't know if anyone wants the Kennedy-esque moniker anymore, given who the third party candidate is. That's maybe one you don't want to run too closely to.
You're right. The Camelot. Maybe we'll just switch it to the Camelot-esque. Yeah, no, maybe you're right. Perhaps not Kennedy, but you know what I mean. That old school, slicked back, young persona. But they might need to change their branding on that.
Well, absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for both of you joining me today as we jump into this weekend ahead of the Republican National Convention. And yeah, we'll look forward to having these conversations again. And Brittany, you're out of town next week, or because I'd seen a post that you're going to be at the convention. So
yeah.
very
Yes,
nice.
I'll be at the convention. I'll make a plug. Not that you said I could or anything, but since you brought it up, I will be at convention with a group called Principles First, which is traditional conservatives who are not fans of Trump, and we want to restore integrity to the Republican Party. And so, if you're interested, visit principlesfirst.us, and it's going to be some incredible counter programming. I'm very excited about it.
Oh, interesting. That sounds awesome. Enjoy yourself. Have a good time.
Thank you again for taking your time.
Yes, thank you, Will. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.